This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. The longer and longer this Watson thing goes on, the more people are going to go from talking about how bad Watson is to how bad it is that the Browns general manager and head coach and ownership are still playing him. See, it's one thing to find out that this $230 million quarterback that you invested 3 first-round draft picks in is a dud, right? Nobody knew that when you traded for him. We knew it was morally dubious what the Browns had done. We knew it was deeply cynical what the Browns had done, but nobody, even Deshaun Watson's biggest haters at that time, would have imagined that Deshaun Watson's career would have played out like this in Cleveland. The assumption pretty much across the board was that he'd be good at football, but would it be worth the cost? So you're going to get a little bit of grace from folk, understanding that nobody thought that Deshaun Watson was going to be this bad for this long. Nobody thought that it would appear as if he just forgot how to play quarterback. Nobody saw it coming. A lot of people will give you grace for that. Hell, there's a lot of people who are willing to say, hey, this is not Kevin's fault. He never even wanted him in the first place. Or this is not Andrew Berry's fault. He never wanted him, right? Pin this whole thing on the Haslam family. I don't really buy that stuff. I think that Kevin had a lot to do with Deshaun being here and Deshaun still being out there. I think Andrew had a lot to do with Deshaun being here and Deshaun still being out here. And the longer this thing goes on, the more you play him, the more you're forced to quasi-defend him at your press conferences because you're making the decision to keep him as the starter. The more you're making it seem like it's not on the table that you're going to bench him, the more and more obvious it is that your hands are dirty in this one too. I've talked about this before. I'll talk about it a lot. I think this is going to be one of the main through points of this regime with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. And it's one of the things that I'm concerned I don't see any improvement in, and it's the cynical approach, right? The idea that it only matters how much we improve the team, and it doesn't matter what that shakes up around the team. Deshaun Watson, trading for him, was deeply cynical, right? Openly courting Deshaun Watson while you had Baker Mayfield on the team was a deeply cynical approach to trying to improve the team. They did the same thing a year earlier after the 2020 season, by the way, with Aaron Rodgers. Like, the Browns do this thing a lot. It happened last offseason with Brandon Ayuk and Amari Cooper, where the Browns were very publicly going after Brandon Ayuk. Like, the Browns have this cynical approach to improving the team. And sometimes it ends up with you doing the Amari Cooper trade and getting much better. But other times it ends up with a lot of fractured relationships along the way. Like, that's just a huge part of it. And that is, I think, the biggest weakness in Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry's approach. It's too cynical. They need to think about how these things kind of affect other things that are going on. This shows up in Andrew Berry's draft history. This shows up in Andrew Berry's free agency history. Like, this pops up a lot where Andrew Berry just looks at the impact on the field and he makes a cynical decision to bring a player on that might not make sense. I think we get too caught up in that as a franchise overall. And the Deshaun Watson trade is the crown jewel of cynicism, because this was the most cynical move of them all. Again, on paper, you're getting a quarterback who was top 5, you're upgrading, and you're trying to win a Super Bowl. And that's why you made the move. But in reality, you traded for a deeply controversial quarterback in the peak of his controversy, who has baggage that the fan base has to carry and the locker room has to carry, and ultimately the franchise. The reason it has to work out is the players carry the brunt of that cynicism, right? The negative end of it. The fan base has to carry the brunt of that and the other effects. Like, that is stuff that the players have to deal with, that the fan base has to deal with. And what you can have if you keep making cynical decisions that don't work out is either a player base that can't stand you anymore, or a fan base that can't stand the team anymore. And I don't know where the players are at. I don't think the players are there yet. I think the players are still giving us a shot. But the fans certainly are. Like, if you're wondering why, despite the track record of Andrew Berry not being that bad, and why Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have always been kind of at the receiving end of these fire calls by a lot of fans, despite me personally thinking that they shouldn't be fired, part of the reason that people do this is because Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski keep making these cynical decisions that nobody feels good about because they think it's going to make the team better. And some of these fans are just tired of bearing the brunt of that. Obviously, it's more complex than that. It's not just as simple as this is what all fans are feeling, and that's not what I'm trying to imply. But if you don't think the cynical nature of how the Browns have approached trying to improve this team since 2020 has taken its toll on folk, I don't think you've been paying attention. It's not normal for a fan base to want a 2-time coach of the year fired as badly as this fan base wants Kevin Stefanski fired. And it's in part because of this cynical stuff that they keep doing. And here's one of the logical fallacies I think the Browns are falling into, because they are a well-educated front office. They are a very smart front office, and sometimes smart people kind of get this fascination with being right, or technically right? Like, it doesn't matter what the side effects are because I'm right about this, right? And what I've learned as I've gotten older is somebody who also had a fascination with being right. Being right feels great, but it's kind of overrated at the end of the day. There have been many of times where I have gone on this show and been right about something, and it didn't matter that I was right because I wasn't reading the room. That is where I feel like the Browns are. They might be technically right about something, but they're not reading the room. They're not doing the people stuff well, and they're alienating a lot of Browns fans because of it. And that's why I think this regime, despite being the most successful since 99, also feels like the most polarizing since 99. You know, like, I've been on this side of the argument many times where the Browns run a reverse or they run a toss on a 3rd and 1, and the Browns were technically right about calling that play because it was there. It was going to be a big hitter, but somebody missed a block or got a holding call, and it didn't hit and ended up being a big loss. And the Browns were technically right to call that play. But if you're a fan watching, you're just going to be furious. You don't care that the Browns were technically correct for doing that. Because, again, there is being right when it matters and being right when it don't matter. And sometimes the Browns are just too focused on being right that they don't care when it matters and when it doesn't. You know, you can make the argument that the Brandon Ayuk situation being public is another example of that. Yeah, the Browns are correct. Brandon Ayuk would have been an upgrade from Amari Cooper. And we can see it now, that was something that they should have pursued. But also, like, how much did that affect him? We don't know. I would like to think that Brandon Ayuk situation didn't really affect Amari Cooper and isn't responsible for what we're seeing. But honestly, what we're seeing is so bizarre that I can't take it off the board. This is what I mean by cynical. This is what I mean by this like fascination with being technically correct, not necessarily being the best thing or the best mindset for this Cleveland Browns front office. And that's just on a play-to-play level or a game-to-game level. And then you think of like some of the bigger, more cynical decisions they've made, and it's no bigger cynical decision than Deshaun Watson and making the decision to trade for him because you thought he was a Pro Bowl top 5 quarterback, but you also knew that he had this baggage with him. And think about the scope of that baggage that it's had, the damage that that's had. Like, we are now more associated with the acts that Deshaun Watson has done while he was a Houston Texan than the Houston Texans are, because we traded for that baggage and now we own it. It's a deeply cynical thing to do. And when you're going to be that cynical, it's got to work out. And the thing is, the funny thing is to me, is that even though the Browns do these cynical things and they have this cynical approach to going after talent upgrades, the things that work out are not the cynical decisions that the Browns make. Re-signing David Njoku was the opposite of a cynical decision. That was an emotional decision. You believed that player could develop. You wanted to keep him around in the locker room. You felt like he was developing into a leader, so you extended him before he did anything on the field. And that's one of your best contract extensions you've done. Hell, even right now, extending Jack Conklin doesn't seem like as bad as an idea as it did last year. I saw Jack Conklin out there for the first time all season. And I'm like, damn, yeah, DeJuan Jones has a lot of growth to get to, because it was a noticeable difference with Jack Conklin out there. The decisions that have worked for this team in the Stefanski-Berry era, despite how cynical they can be, have not been the cynical decisions. I would hope that they could evaluate that and understand that maybe they should think about other things when they make these big decisions. Right now, the decision to keep Deshaun Watson out there when it's obvious he's not playing at a consistently acceptable level at the quarterback position, where he's playing at a level that's below replacement for what Kevin Stefanski has done in his career. It's a deeply cynical decision as well, because in their mind, they're just like, I want to see what Deshaun Watson has before we give up on him. Right? That's why I think, bottom line, I know that people are pinning this shit on Jimmy Haslam, but I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have a set amount of games in their head that they want to give this, and they're going to give this thing that amount of games. It could be 8, it could be 12, it can be the whole rest of the season. But they want to see this thing out through so they can be sure of their evaluation of Deshaun Watson. Again, it's a cynical decision, because you're sure of your evaluation of Deshaun Watson now because you let it play out the whole season. But think about what that affects. Think about the morale on this team. Think about the fact that, like, some of these dudes ain't going to trust you again because you didn't make the move that was right for the team when it was right for the team. And you could tell them, oh, your hands were tied and all that, but people see through that. People know if you're actually trying to make a change or if you're just giving them lip service. And that's going to decrease trust in this locker room. The one thing this Browns team has had, and I would give them credit for this coming off this Philadelphia game, I thought this was one of the best efforts that they got from both offense and defense this season. And it's super late, and the team had a horrible record coming into it. I think that's a credit to Kevin in how these guys feel about playing for Kevin. They came out and they played hard. The defense played hard for 4 quarters with no reassurance that the offense would do anything for them. That's Jim Schwartz, that's Kevin Stefanski. They get credit for that. I thought the offense, despite the fact that the quarterback wasn't executing early, still played really hard. Pierre Strong ran his ass off, took a ton of hits, came back in the game, took more hits. Same thing with Deontay Foreman. I thought this team played hard. They didn't play clean, but they played hard as hell. Like, I was watching this game and I thought to myself, wow, it seems like the team has some players that want to win today. Like, they kind of found a way to dig themselves out of whatever rut they were in, and they started to try to play hard. Again, playing hard doesn't mean play well, but they played hard. And you still have the locker room if you're Kevin. But if you keep doing things like this, they're not going to trust you anymore. They're not going to trust the organization. They're not going to trust you as a coach. They're not going to trust Andrew Berry as a general manager. And I think this is a mistake that they keep making over and over and over again. That's my big concern from all of this. Are the Browns in their approach too cynical? And is that cynicism something that's going to bite them in the ass in the long run? I don't know the answer to that because I can't tell the future, but I don't feel good about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.